Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of StarterBuild. This time we have a new ship that we're going to take a look at here as sort of a first look to the Jupiter class Tier 6 ship here. Let me pull it up in my list of ships. Here we go. So the Jupiter class, for those who aren't familiar with it, it's something that just came out. It was something that was sort of inspired by the community. They had us vote between different ship designs, and this is what the final look of the Jupiter class carrier is. So it is a Tier 6 carrier, and I'll sort of explain it as I claim the ship here. So basically, what we have here is kind of an interesting setup. There's a crew of 2,200, base hull of 52,000, shield modifier of 1.25, which is similar to most science ships. Base turn of 6, which is sort of more dreadnoughty. So just to be clear, the shield modifier 1.25 is very sciencey, but the base hull 52,000 is more in the cruiser category. And then you'll notice that forward weapons and aft weapons we have 3 and 3, so it's comparable to most science ships. Device slots is 4, hangar bays are 2. So this is kind of a nice thing. So we'll sort of get into how that plays into the ship itself as I get to the ship here. So by default, as you can see, it comes with these 2 peregrine fighters. Now we can actually see the console layout a little better. So we have 3 tactical consoles, 4 science consoles, 3 engineering, and then we have those 3 forward, 3 aft weapons. Now the interesting thing about this ship is that it is set up very similar to most science ships, except for the fact that it does not have a secondary deflector dish. So secondary deflectors are really handy for science builds now because you can make a drain build that's focused on certain abilities or a control build that's focused on certain abilities, and you can set up your science skills to maximize the extra damage from that secondary deflector because it causes a radiation damage. This does not have that, so this is kind of a weird beast of a thing. So I'd venture to say that this is actually an attempt at making a hybrid of a science ship and a cruiser, because you have most of a science ship in appearance, but in terms of the hull rating and the turn rate, as well as just the fact that it has hangars, it's going to be more like a typical cruiser. Not quite command cruiser territory, but you have some options. Okay, now we're going to talk about the consoles and items that I have on this ship. Now basically, I wanted to start again with a starter build. So most of the items on this are from mission rewards, but there is a couple items on here that are from the exchange and reputations. So we'll go through these as we get to them. So the first major mission rewards that we have here are the 3-piece set from the Butterfly mission. So that includes a Temporal Phase Overcharge Warp Core Mark 12, which includes the Temporal Phase Capacitor. The nice thing about that is it has a 50% Bridge Officer ability cooldown reduction. It also has extra skills, as a lot of warp cores do, and adds 7.5% of your aux power to your shield power as bonus power. So that's good for this kind of hybrid tank build where you're going to be running high aux power, generally speaking, because you're doing a lot of exotic damage. Even though it's not your main focus, it still helps. The next piece here is the omnidirectional anti-chronoton infused tetryon beam array. I know that's a mouthful, but basically the Mark 14 is because I upgraded it. It comes Mark 12 as part of the mission, so the numbers on this are going to be a little bit higher than you'd see on the Mark 12, possibly by a decent margin, but that's normal. When you go from Mark 12 to 14, things get a lot nicer. So that's that. Now the other major mission set that I have here are the Soul defense set. So I have the Soul Defense Deflector, Engines, and Shields. So that includes the Deflector, which has the 35 shield emitters and 26 hull repair. Those are the 2 major perks to that. Plus there's the 3-piece set bonus of the Soul set. So the Soul set basically is, if you look at it here, it is, the 2-piece is the 35 kinetic damage resistance rating and 25 energy damage resistance rating. 3-piece is Discharge Repair Nanites, which gives me 13,000 hit points as a heal, which is a pretty significant heal. So it's basically in place of Miracle Worker, since I'm playing as a science captain on this character. But both of those are really good things to have as a set bonus, especially from a mission reward, so it's not something you have to spend a lot of dilithium on. Now the set bonuses on the butterfly mission set, as I'm just going to call it, the 2-piece gives you 13.3% tetryon damage boost, and the 3-piece gives you this anti-chronoton infused tetryon discharge. Now this is really good when combined with gravity well, because you're going to use it on a particular area, and it's going to affect multiple people, especially if they're pulled into a gravity well. So it's definitely a nice little discharge there. That being said, on top of that, we also have a couple of mission rewards. This one actually is from the Reputation, the Refracting Tetryon Beam Array Mark 12. That's from a loot drop from doing an hourly or a daily Reputation project. You can also get them manually from the Nukara store, but it's really not worth that dilithium. You might as well just run the hourlies to get more dilithium, and on the off chance that you do get a Refracting Tetryon Beam Array, I would definitely use it on this build. We also have the Resonating Tetryon Beam Array. That comes from the new link, which is the Cardassian story arc, so that's actually a nice thing to have. And then we have this other beam array here, which is the Tetryon Beam Array Mark 13. This comes from Revolution, which is a story in the Delta story arc, so Delta Rising, Delta Quadrant story arc. So that's a nice thing to have just from that mission. In addition to that, and the other set bonuses you might get, Midnight will also give you, if you play it again and again after you get the main set that I have on here, you can get very rare Tetryon Pulse generators that are Mark 12. If you're going all out for your build but aren't part of a good fleet yet, that's probably the way to go. If not, the Mark 12 uncommon ones are really cheap on the exchange, so you can get them at around face value or about half of that on the exchange, because they do drop in loot from random drops during just missions that you're running. You'll get these, or you can just get them off the exchange. So I do have those 3 tactical consoles that are Tetryon Pulse generators, and of course you want to maximize your tactical consoles as much as you can in certain situations, so that's what I did here. In addition, in terms of the Reputation console that I used, I have the Nukara particle converter here, and that's mostly so I can get the accuracy bonus from that, the particle generator skill boost, as well as shield power setting, but that also gets me the set bonus combined with this Nukara web mine launcher. So the mine launcher itself isn't amazing, but combined it gives you the 8.9% Tetryon damage boost, as well as a 17.8 flow cap increase. So those are kind of nice to have. Now, 2 things I splurged on the exchange for were these here, the omnidirectional Tetryon Beam Array. That's a really nice thing to have to combine with the omnidirectional anti-chronoton beam array. Now, normally what I would suggest if you're running these 2 things on the back is a kinetic cutting beam with the Borg assimilated module, but I actually noticed a DPS gain from swapping the KCB with the Nukara web mine launcher and the Nukara console. And another thing you might ask with this build is that the Nukara console 3-piece would have the hyper dual refracting Tetryon beam bank, so basically the dual beam from the Nukara set. That one I am using on a science build separately from this for that Tetryon damage boost to get the 2-piece for that. But basically that is not something that's practical for this ship because the turn rate is so low. You'd really have a rough time making full use of that dual beam. So really the web mine launcher is a good trade-off for the KCB, because you're going to be just using it as a way to deal some damage, but not as much as your Tetryon. And also, the 3rd piece of that butterfly set is the Temporal Disentanglement Suite. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but basically it gives you +4 aux power setting, plus 20% max shield capacity, which is nice, and then some variability for the critical chance and severity based on your aux power level. Those things aren't super critical because they don't make a significant DPS difference, but they are kind of an extra boost for having that console there. Now, another item that I splurged on the exchange for was the Exotic Particle Field Exciter. This is Mark 14 only because I bought the Mark 12 very rare and upgraded it. A lot of people end up trying to craft the Mark 12 ultra rares or Mark 12 very rares and upgrade them till they get ultra rare. But this one I did not do that with, mostly just because of resources and so forth. But the base on the Mark 12 version of this, you're probably going to see plus 30 particle gen skill and plus 20% maximum shield capacity. So that's just something to consider there. Now another mission reward here, I have the Polaric Modulator Mark 12. Now that is from the Delta Flight mission, which is part of the Iconian story arc. This is a really nice thing to have on a tank or anything that has a slower turn rate, because this boosts both the turn rate as well as the inertia rating. So that basically means that you'll power slide a little less if you're going full speed or full impulse. So it's a nice thing to have. Now for this is sort of my flex console here. I put in the Neutronium Alloy Mark 11 because that's giving us extra kinetic and energy damage resistance, which is going to be good if I'm using this sort of as a tank, which I am. So that is a nice thing to have. Also the Constriction Anchor, that boosts exotic damage by 23%. I didn't think that would be really a good idea on this particular build, since it's not primarily exotic damage that it's dealing, but it does make a pretty big difference with that gravity well and feedback pulse, which we'll get into later. The other thing this ship has is the fleet coordination module. This is the epic console that, every ship comes with one, every C-Store ship anyway. This one boosts accuracy by 10% or 15% for shield hit points. Also, that is affected by other things, as if I highlight that ability here, Fleet Maneuver Alpha, it's showing as a 20% bonus damage and 20% bonus accuracy. So just something to keep in mind. That's that there. Now other ship devices I have are the Subspace Field Modulator, which is a huge damage resistance boost there. Some Scorpion Fighters, because why not? And then Engine Battery and Aux Battery. These two things you basically can put in whatever you want. I just kind of put those in to fill the gap. Now the big thing that this ship has that no other hangar has are the ability to equip these advanced Callisto escorts. Now these are basically like frigates. I consider them at par with, let's say, your Mark 4, or I should say Tier 4 Defiant class. Not really the best ship, but you can still do a lot with them as pets. That's the kind of cool thing. And since they are listed as frigates, you only get 2 per hangar bay total. They do have decent cooldown, but the ship mastery will, that'll take care of some of that with the quick deployment. So those are nice pets to have if you're firing at larger targets, but if you're using the Peregrine fighters, that's fine too, especially with the smaller health rating targets. For example, if you're in a situation like Japori where there's a lot of smaller targets, that would be more beneficial for you. Okay, so now I want to go through the bridge officer abilities a little bit here. Now, we already went through the items, so we'll basically kind of keep this brief. We have a commander science seat, so that's basically where you're going to be getting most of your abilities from. So Gravity Well 3 is my go-to science ability. Also, it ties everybody in so that you can launch the anti-chronoton discharge. Those two combined together are pretty lethal, especially when combined with the Ionic Turbulence 2 found on my Lieutenant Commander Engineering Hybrid seat. We'll get to that in a moment, though. So, also on the Commander Science seat, we have a Feedback Pulse 2, which is reflects incoming damage. We have Charged Particle Burst 1, which damages shields to opponents within a certain area of you, which is kind of a nice thing to go with this build, because the tetryon is also a shield damaging thing. So those combined will help your pets land those torpedo hits. Also have Polarized Hull here because it helps you get out of a sticky situation pretty fast. And with my Lieutenant Science to supplement those other abilities, I have Science Team 2 and Hazard Emitters 1 as my go-to heals. My Lieutenant Commander Engineering Hybrid, the Intel one, we have Emergency Power to Shields 1, Engineering Team 2, which are my go-to engineering abilities, and then we have Ionic Turbulence 2. So again, that basically causes a huge cloud, and I tend to fire that at the same time as Gravity Well, so that way you get people sucked into the cloud. and that actually kills their damage resistance and their speed, which lowers their defense just because of their speed being lower. So it's a huge thing to combine, especially before firing this discharge here. Now, we do have a Lieutenant Universal and a Lieutenant Tactical left. I put them both as tactical that mirror each other, because that way you can always keep attack pattern beta 1 and beamfire at will 1 cycling. And that's important, particularly when you have pets, because attack pattern beta affects not only your damage, but your allies' damage against that same set of targets. So that is kind of a big thing there. Now, if you are running the reciprocity trait, which comes from the Phantom Intel Escort, you may not need the second set of attack pattern beta and firewall 1, in which case you'd probably run a Lieutenant Engineer with those abilities, and then you'd have some other intel abilities here. For example, my weapons of choice are Intel Team and override subsystem safeties, especially if you have a warp core that makes use of the amp. So if all of your power levels are over 75, that'll boost your damage output. If you run override subsystem safeties, it's basically just an alternative to the Plasmonic Leech console. So it's just another way to do it. Similar idea, not as consistent, but it also kills one of your subpower systems after a certain number of seconds. Like after this expires, it kills that subpower, but you can bring that right back online with engineering team. So you always want to make sure, if you are running subsystem safety override, make sure you have an engineering team also slotted. So that's just food for thought for that. Now I'm not going to get into traits really, because traits are really subjective. I actually have a lot unlocked on this particular character, but most people running a starter build won't. So to compare apples to apples, this is really just to show you how to set up the ship and get it going. So that's sort of the main idea there. Now, Mastery, I just wanted to go over that really quick here. We have Quick Deployment, which is the Mark 1 Mastery. It gets your Hangar recharge speed down by 45%, which is nice, and also boosts the rank up XP for all Hangar pets. The second rank is Armored Hull, which boosts your hull hit points by 10%. The third one is Reactive Shield Technology, which gives you a steady shield regen of 587, in my case, every 6 seconds. That may vary depending on how you have your skills set up. In addition, Advanced Shield Systems, this increases your max shield HP by 10%. And then the ship trait itself is Insult to Injury. So what that does is it basically activating any Intel Bridge Officer ability or Tractor Beam 1, 2, or 3 grants Torpedo Transport Warhead 1 to all Hangar pets. So what that is, if you're not familiar with that ability, is basically it's an Intel ability normally where you would hit that before firing a torpedo, and it beams it onto their ship, which basically does 100% shield penetration. Now, the downside of that is that, as opposed to something like Torpedo Spread, even Torpedo Spread 2 or 1, where you normally get a spread, where it's multiple torpedoes possibly penetrating the shield somewhat and getting critical hits, the Transport Warhead is just, the base damage is all you get. If you have critical damage boosters or modifiers on a torpedo, it ignores those because there's no chance of critical hits on those for whatever reason. So that is just food for thought on that as well. So now that we have the basics down of what this ship is set up as, now we basically want to show you guys what it can do. So I'll show you a run that I did of Midnight, and we'll kind of take a look at just how this performs in a sort of high stress, high energy battle. And this is going solo, so I'm not going with any allies or fleeties or anything like that, just me by myself. With the starter build, again, I do have certain traits that are adding to the build, but realistically you could do the same thing without most of those, as the traits that I'm running are primarily for tanking. So that's just how we're going to set that up. So I'll see you guys out there.
Our attack group is taking heavy losses.
RRW of Vetrix responding to your call for assistance, Hood.
those ships are manipulating some kind of massive infrastructure, requesting immediate assistance.
I need this, Lorenz. Changing course to Jupiter Station.
Shipyards are losing integrity. We need someone on damage control, or we may lose them before the ships in dock can mobilize.
Nakagi here. We've restored main power. Thanks for keeping the gantries intact. Bringing the Fight 99th Attack Wing into battle now.
This is EST control. We're losing life support and transporters are offline.
First gate stop is lost main tower. We're evacuating the crew.
So at this point you kind of get the gist of it. This was a normal run of Midnight. It wasn't advanced or elite or anything like that, but it is a solo run. So for the amount of enemies that I'm fighting, actually, it's holding its own pretty well. This ended up dealing about 11k DPS, and again, most of this is just mission reward items, with the exception of those couple reputation items. I have 0 fleet gear on this ship. So it is doing pretty well, all things considered. So would I recommend this ship to other captains out there looking for a new carrier to grab? To be honest, I'm not sure. This ship is nice for the bridge officer layout, and the fact that you have that Lieutenant Universal, it gives you a little bit of flexibility. But in terms of general performance, you'd probably be better off going with a dedicated science build or a dedicated cruiser rather than this, which is sort of a compromise of the two. If you like the idea of compromising a cruiser with a science build, this is actually a really solid way to do that. But you lose a secondary deflector, which means you lose a lot of exotic damage, and on the tanking side you have a high hull rating, but you don't have the cruiser abilities. But thank you all for watching, and if you like the video, please comment below or like the video as you see fit, and I will see you guys out there.